So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah, a chiropractor, health and career coach for other clinicians. And this is part of what I think makes such a huge difference. Like when we are taking the next step in our career, when we are navigating burnouts, all this kind of stuff, resilience is one of the things that we turn to, right? We need that reserve of resilience in order to do the things that we want to do those big things. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about resilience, what it is, how do we create it or build it? Can we do that? Or is it just kind of like an inborn, that you either have it or you don't? What is it important for? And then just some tools that we can use to start developing that. I'd love to know your thoughts on resilience. Also, if you have like some or other experience that you've gone through as a clinician that has really really kind of built that feeling of resilience in your own life, please feel free to share those. Okay, awesome. So the first part of just, is it something that we can build? Because if we don't actually believe that it's something that we can develop, of course, we're not going to actually do the work and put in the effort of actually doing that, right? Like if we just believe that, maybe I wasn't gifted with the resilience gene or whatever it is, then we're not going to put in the work to actually get there. So that idea of a growth mindset, this is how that comes into like in a practical way, right? So if we have a growth mindset when it comes to resilience, we believe that even if we might not feel resilient now, we can build that muscle, we can start practicing the skills, and we can start to develop the behaviors and the characteristics that actually lead to us being more resilient. So I think that's the first thing, just knowing that it is something that you can create, you can work on, right? It is not something inborn. It's not something that, just some people are lucky enough to have and others not. It really is something that we can cultivate. So there are different definitions of the word, but they all kind of surround the basic idea. I'm going to just read some of the definitions. So things like competence under stress. So we can still, even though we are stressed, we can still do things, we can still handle it. Things like recovery from trauma. And then the one that to me kind of describes the whole of it is positive adaptation despite adversity. And that is kind of the agreed upon way to describe resilience. And it shows us the two aspects of it, right? So there's the adversity, there's the hard thing that's happening, it's the frustration, it's the difficulty, it's the hard emotions. And then there's the positive adaptation. It's the learning to navigate through that difficulty that builds resilience. So we need these two components, which I guess is the bad news, right? Yes, we can create it. Yes, we can build it, but we need the tough stuff in order to do that, right? And we actually scan our day looking for things that were hard, that we navigated through in order to build our confidence and our self-trust. So we need those two things. And this is not to glorify really horrible things and struggles, right? No one is going to like wish that upon you just because you're going to grow from it and be resilient and all that kind of stuff, right? It's not to glorify that, but it's just to realize that the reality is when we navigate hard things and we actually positively adapt from that, that is how we build resilience. So I think, like I was saying, when we're taking, the next step, right? Often we're looking at, well, is it going to work? Is it going to, is everything going to go right, right? Is everything going to be smooth? Is everything going to be successful? And really what we want to cultivate is that idea of things might not go very well. In fact, things might go terribly. Things might be really hard, but I trust myself to navigate through that. I trust myself to grow from that and learn from that. So instead of resisting or avoiding doing hard things, we can actually welcome it because we know that we're going to grow through that. Okay. So yeah, please share any of your experiences with like doing hard things and navigating through that. And I mean, you guys are clinicians. I can already draw from a few examples of like where you've done something hard, right? You did your degree. You know, some people have started their own practice, or they've navigated through a really difficult locum or associate position. Maybe you've moved country, right? That's also, this stuff is really, really hard. And we're not trying to avoid that. We're just trying to back ourselves to learn from it and grow through it and have that positive adaptation to it. Okay, so why is resilience important? So resilience is kind of under the umbrella of our psychological health, right? Emotional or psychological health is really much healthier when we have strong resilience. And we have better physical health when we have better psychological health. Our general well-being and our like day-to-day experience of our life is so different when we have our psychological health. So we really need to be developing that resilience. But also just imagine the opposite, right? Like imagine if you were always bracing yourself for what's going to come next. You're always anxious about what's going to happen because you don't feel like you can navigate through that. You don't feel like you can make it through, or you don't feel like you can handle that, right? So you're bracing yourself, you're anxious, you're avoiding negative emotions. So maybe you're numbing out or you are distracting yourself with something all the time and you're not willing to actually feel those emotions and not being willing to, like I said, that next step, right? Or that thing that you really want to do, you're not willing to go and do that thing because you're worried about it having a negative outcome or not working out well. So that idea of I'm backing myself to handle whatever comes of this, right? Whatever difficulty, whatever hard emotions, I'm going to navigate through that and I back myself with that. That is resilience. Okay. So I like to think about it as kind of similar to like the burnout model. When we have resilience, we can think of that tank, right? Like our tank of resources versus our stresses. So our stresses are always, you know, using up resources out of our tank. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, right? Sometimes we want that. Fulfilling work is still a stressor, right? You know, being a parent is still a stressor, but it's stuff that is meaningful to us. So where we can, we do want to choose our stresses, but where we can't, we want to change our response to it, right? But just looking at that kind of stressor side of it. And then looking at recovery. So anything that is kind of filling up your tank is going to increase your recovery. And if you think about having more in the tank than is coming out, you can think of that as the idea of resilience, right? Because I have more I have more that I can use for this thing than it's going to take out of me, then it's going to remove from me. And that is kind of how we can start thinking about resilience. So if you think of that tank model, right, anything that creates resources in that tank is going to make you more resilient. So think about, you know, community support, social support, your relationships, how strong those relationships are. And then we have more personal characteristics that make us more resilient or that predispose us to developing or handling a situation in a way that makes us more resilient rather than breaks us down. So I'm going to focus on that, but just remember that tank. Like we need a lot of things from a lot of different aspects, and we have a lot of opportunity for recovery and for resilience in other aspects of our life as well. But I just want to focus on like the things that are more to do with what we can actually change or what we more likely can change, right? Because relationships, seeking out support, community, that's still something that we can do. But the things that generally make someone quite resilient are things like self-efficacy, right? Same thing with our patients, right? We want to build that self-efficacy. We want to do that for ourselves as well. We want to feel like I can do this, I can handle it. Yes, it's going to be hard, but I can do this. Tolerance of negative affect. So tolerance essentially of negative emotions. And I think this is where so many of us kind of get caught up, right? If you think about worrying about something that's going to happen, or, not going for something because you're worried about what will happen, often what you are worrying about is that negative emotion that is going to come with. Like, what are you not willing to feel? What don't you want to feel? What are you avoiding feeling, right? So people who can tolerate those difficult emotions, those people tend to be more resilient. And that makes sense, right? If I'm not worried about being disappointed, I'm more likely to go for something. If I'm not worried about something failing, I'm more likely to, start my own practice, or whatever the case is for you specifically. But if we are really willing to sit with those uncomfortable emotions and navigate through them, we are much more likely to be resilient. So yeah, we also want to think about, there is no such thing as a bad emotion, right? Things that feel uncomfortable are not necessarily bad. Yes, we want more what we would call positive emotions to negative emotions, but we need those negative emotions. It is not healthy to only have positive emotions. Think about something like grief, right? That is the appropriate response in a certain scenario. You wouldn't want to take that away when something terrible happens. You wouldn't want to not feel any grief, right? If you had really hurt someone, you might feel ashamed or feel hurt yourself, right? We don't want to remove those emotions. They are incredibly useful and powerful. And if we are willing to work through them, we can come out strong on the other side. We can grow from it. We can learn from it. So not kind of dividing emotions as good or bad. I should only be feeling the good emotions. I should be happy all the time. I should feel joyful. And we want a balance of, the ratio is like 3-1. So we want kind of 3 positive emotions for every negative emotions, but we're not trying to eliminate negative emotions entirely, right? It's how we process it. It's how we deal with it. It's whether we run away from it and numb and distract, or do we go through that, essentially that tunnel, right, to the other side, instead of, kind of waiting at the outside, or, kind of, as I said, numbing and distracting throughout that whole tunnel. We want to go through the tunnel because what's on the other side is growth and learning and change. The other thing is a very strong foundation of a sense of self. And this is something that I find really often when people don't feel resilient, is they don't feel like they have that very strong sense of self. This is who I am. I know that I can do X, Y, Z, right? Like very strong self-trust, backing yourself, and knowing like who you are, what your values are, what's important to you, right? What is your meaning, or your feeling of purpose, right? All of those things can make you resilient. Think of like that idea of a strong why. If you are navigating something really tough, something really difficult, something challenging, if you have a very strong reason why you're doing that and why it's important, you are much more likely to be able to do that thing. Other things such as a sense of humor helps. Things like hopefulness, right? Strengths like feeling gratitude, feeling kindness, feeling hope, a sense of bravery. When you have actual strategies to deal with your stress, right? These are all things that can help build resilience. A balanced perspective of experience, right? So when something happens, that you can look at it from different angles. And we'll go into that a little bit more in a second. And then things like being flexible, having resolve, having conviction about things. So all of these things just make you feel almost like you as a whole are more secure in yourself. You're much more likely to be able to like weather whatever storm comes at you, right? So Martin Seligman, who is a positive psychology researcher, and he has 3 things that he says makes it more likely that he will have a negative response to certain emotions or certain experiences, rather than building and increasing your resilience. So the first one is personalization. So basically thinking that like everything is your fault. You're to blame. you're the one that is creating this whole mess, right? Taking everything very personally, or as some kind of signal that there's something flawed within you or something that is deeply wrong with you. So personalization, pervasiveness. So this pronunciation. Okay, pervasiveness. So assuming that the negative situations are going to impact everything, right? Like you almost feel like it's going to just destroy your whole life, right? If my practice doesn't succeed in the way that I want it to, it's going to affect everything. My relationships are going to crash. Other aspects of my health are going to crash. I'm never going to be able to do anything again. You have this sort of sense that it's going to affect every single aspect of your life. And then the third one is permanence. So just believing that this thing that you're going through and this hardship and this thing that's really tough, that's going to affect you for the rest of your life. You don't see it as, okay, this is like a tunnel that I'm going through, and then on the other side is like, a new chapter. It's like, this is going to last forever, instead of it being like a transient thing. So believing those three things about a situation can really make it much more difficult for you to navigate something with that resilience, with that self-trust and confidence. The other thing that I just wanted to touch on was a really interesting thing that I sort of discovered. So there's, one aspect of, I don't feel resilient. I don't feel like I can handle these hardships or go through these things. That's the one aspect. And then we really want to be building that resilience. What I've also found is that sometimes it's more about an identity or making it mean something about yourself. So a situation like, I want to leave my job, or I want to, move to another country, or whatever it is, or move back from that other country back home, whatever it is. Some people are concerned that that decision somehow signals that they are not resilient. So they are worried about this kind of identity of someone who's not resilient. And then they will often kind of push through something that's not even what they want, what they find meaningful, what they see for their long term. When they look at their values and their, vision of the future, whatever it is, that's not what they actually want. But they don't make a change because they are worried that that means that they are not resilient. So that's the kind of flip side of this coin, right? Sometimes we force ourselves to navigate hard things purely to kind of prove to ourselves or other people that we actually are resilient people. So just noticing, what am I making this mean about me as a person? And just being aware of when we're doing something because we really believe in it, because it's aligned with our values, versus something that is protective against a certain identity that we don't want, unwanted identities. Okay, awesome. So that's what I wanted to say about resilience. As always, please continue the discussion in the comments, and I will go back and comment on anything that you comment on. If you miss anything live, you can go back and watch the replay. So we just discussed a few things about, the definition of it. Is it something, is resilience something that we can actually build and cultivate, or is it kind of just, you have it or you don't? And then some tools, also glad you enjoyed it, mine. And then some tools to kind of build resilience, and what kind of personal attributes and that overall your life attributes, right? That 10, what makes it more likely that you will be resilient, and why that's really important. Thank you so much for listening, and I will chat to you guys soon. Bye.